Доброго дня. Вітаю всіх, хто долучився до нас.
Hello, everyone who joined us online. Hello, everyone present in our information agency, Ukrinform. My name is Zhovtenko, and I'm the acting executive director of the Foundation Democratic Initiatives, named after Viktor Ilko Kucheriv, and I'm happy to greet you here at our round table. We have Anton Hrushetskyi, the executive director of the Kyiv International Sociology Institute, Mykhailo, Mishchenko, the deputy director of the Sociological service of the Razumkov Center, and we also have Magnus Carlsson, the professor of the Cederschiold University from Stockholm, Sweden. The topic of our conversation will be related to the question of resilience of the society and the parameters of the resilience and the way these parameters are reflected in our Ukrainian society and the way they are reflected in the Sweden society, what our differences are or what our commonalities are, and also to what extent both Ukraine and Sweden have the common understanding of resilience and how all of this is manifested in the defense sector. We understand that the full-scale invasion of Russia against Ukraine, Russia uses the hybrid tool targeted at the resilience of our society, and those state institutions that set out the main parameters. We need to understand what this resilience provides for, what it depends on, and what factors influence it internally. This is very important in order to be able to have a sense, to understand how to provide security and defense for our society, because a lot of attention is paid to the analysis of Russian hybrid tools, to those things that Russians use in order to undermine the resilience of the Ukrainian society, and even more, we understand that Russian hybrid campaign goes beyond Ukrainian territory, and they target their hybrid weapon at the society of the European countries, also Sweden and other Nordic countries, and the countries of Western Europe, for example, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, because all of them are impacted by the Russian hybrid weapon. They are targeting the resilience of Western society, understanding that the undermined, the destroyed resilience is an open way to destabilize the country in future, the internal policy, the security policy, and also this is one of the key factors of how the defense capacity of the country can be undermined and eroded within the country internally. We are in the same boat with our Western allies in this matter. In our opinion, it is important to pay attention to the common survey, not only related to the hybrid Russian weapons, but also to Russian psychological campaigns that they conduct. But also it is very useful and helpful to have a common understanding of the notion resilience, which Russians are trying to target. We need to understand what are the common parameters of resilience in our case and in the case of our foreign partners, and what parameters are similar or not similar. We have to work on the countering measures in order to combat Russian influence. We need to understand the way resilience works in practice and what it depends on the Ukrainian society and also in the societies of our Western allies. The main topic or the main reason for our today's discussion are the results of the sociological survey conducted in Sweden and Ukraine. The question asked in those surveys were related somehow to how resilience is perceived and how it is constructed in the Ukrainian society, and also what it depends on and the way it is constructed in the Sweden society. And comparing these two results, comparing the commonalities or differences and the way resilience is formed in practice in our countries, we decided to hold the expert roundtable in order to identify the key parameters to which we have to pay attention to sociology-wise and social parameters of resilience-wise, because we need to preserve our resilience and also to combat Russian attacks to undermine it. I think that we will start off and present the Ukrainian results that we received within these surveys, and it is a great pleasure for me to give the floor to Mishchenko, who is going to present the result of the sociological survey in Ukraine. Thank you. So, as it has already been mentioned, these are the results of our common survey conducted together with the Marie Cederschiold University, with the Sociological Service Razumkov Center, and the Foundation Democratic Initiatives named after Ilko Kucheriv. It was conducted in November last year according to the method face-to-face in the Ukrainian controlled areas, except for the temporarily occupied territories and the territories with hostilities. 1,518 respondents were surveyed. As for the factors identifying resilience of the society, we have to mention social and psychological factors, atmosphere in the Ukrainian society, and here we can compare, according to some indicators, the situation before the full-scale invasion. In particular, we were comparing it with the data stemming from 2018, and we were using these similar indicators as in the last survey. One of the indicators was the level of trust in the society. To the question, what do you think, should one be careful in the relationship with the people? Should we trust people? And 22% of the people responded positively, and previously it was 17%. We can say that the level of trust in the society has increased, but in general the level of trust remains lower than in many Western European countries, where the majority of respondents are inclined to respond that the majority of the people can be trusted. I must say that this indicator is very important in the sense that, according to the results of our survey, the people responding positively are more socially active, they more work as volunteers, and they are ready to defend their country than those who respond negatively and say that we have to be very cautious and careful when interacting with people. As for the trust towards different social groups, the situation has remained pretty the same since 2017, but Anyway, the majority of the respondents responded that they do not quite trust people of other religions or other nationalities, probably given that the war is going on and there is a positive dynamics observed, we can perceive it as a positive indicator. And also, it was expected that the majority of the people trust the members of their family, people who live in their neighborhood, people that they personally know, but they are more cautious and careful when it comes to strangers. And this tendency was observed even before the full-scale invasion, and according to the latest survey, as for the trust towards social institutions compared to 2017, the trust towards the armed forces of Ukraine has increased significantly. In 2017, it was 21% of the respondents, and now it's 69%. Also, the level towards charitable organizations, the police, the companies, the state services, the system of justice, the parliament has also increased. We can state that compared to the pre-war times, the trust in the Ukrainian society has increased.
Є і так званий рівень щастя. Ми ставили запитання, чи вважаєте ви себе щасливим? Незважаючи на те, що зараз у нас війна, порівняно з 2017 роком, часто тих, хто відповідає, що щасливими статистично ще не змінилося.
Still, people claim to be happy, and we had 99% in 2016 and 62% in the latest survey. People who believe they are not happy enough or not happy at all in 2017 was 24% and 37% we have according to the latest survey. So the situation hasn't changed much. The younger the respondents, the more they believe, the more often they believe they are happy. So among young people aged 18 to 29 years, it makes up 75%. Comparing to year 2017, the amount of people who are proud to be citizens of Ukraine grew up to 85%. And those who are proud to be citizens of Ukraine, if we embrace all regions, it's 75% in the east and up to 91% in the western region. 60% of those who believe Russian is their mother tongue, and the rest believe that Ukrainian is their mother tongue. And also the engagement of citizens in different social associations, and this indicator is not very high in Ukraine. It makes up 75% of 75% of respondents say they are not members of any association. 8% are members of religious organizations and also volunteer organizations which help the armed forces of Ukraine. 5% responded that they are members of other volunteer or humanitarian organizations. There are also members of other unions and organizations such as sport organizations connected with leisure time, and these people make up less than 5% in each kind of such organizations. 51% of respondents said that they made charitable donations for voluntary organizations which help the armed forces of Ukraine. 18.5% made their contribution for church organizations, and the rest made their contributions, their donations for charitable and volunteer organizations. 32% said that they made no charitable donations last year. 23% of respondents were engaged as volunteers or paid or worked for free in activities, and also a number of people also were engaged in urgent situations such as extinguishing fires and looking for people who went missing. 22% of people worked as volunteers or helped for free people who became refugees. 80% of respondents said that they think it is rational to share their storages with other people during war time. 70% of people said they are sure to the question that when Russia attacked Ukraine, only 22% of people responded that there should be armed response, and only 7% said that we shouldn't, or Ukraine shouldn't have done it. And 25% of people are ready to participate in armed response to Russia, and 90% of people are 60 years, and more percent of people or younger people, 22% of women and 32% of men. And so about 32% of people said that they participated as non-combatants, but they worked in warfare, in regions with active warfare, and a lot of people responded that they would like to participate in such operations, even if there is physical cost to their life. And the younger the respondents, the more often they claim to be ready to participate in such operations, and also men are prone to be more ready to participate in such operations compared to women. If without risk to one's life, 4% responded that they participate in civil protection of Ukraine and working in regions with no active warfare, and 30% responded that they are ready to participate actively. About a quarter, 26% of respondents say that they are ready to participate in protection of Ukraine. 80% of respondents said that volunteers must participate in rescue operations, for example, stop floods, storms, or forest fires, and less concerned, 44% responded that they are ready to assist in rescue operation, even if they put their life and health at risk. And the younger the respondents, more often they say they are ready to participate, comparing to people who are 60 years old, and 30% of women and 52% of men gave such response. 62% said they are ready to assist in rescue operations if there is no danger for their own life. Yes, if there is no danger for their own life or their health. The younger the respondents are, more often they are ready to participate in these activities, and also men give positive answers more often than women. 80% say they are ready to react to urgent situations, to contingency situations. 62% of men need to be ready, and 81% of respondents said that their family is able to provide water for themselves during a week. And the higher indicator is in villages, it's 85%, and a little bit lower in cities, it's 75%. 45% of people say that they are able to provide heating for themselves during a week. And more often, such answer is given by people who live in villages, whereas in cities it makes up 30%, and men answer more often than women. As for electric power supply, during a week, 25% of people are able to provide electric power supply for themselves, and this is often seen in villages than in big cities, and 50% say that their family is able to provide the mobile connection independent of national and local operators of telephone and net connection. And answering the question, as for Ukraine is ready for contingency situations, and in fact there is lack of food supply, most respondents say that they are ready, but there are some who claim that they are not ready for this challenge. And also, some respondents say that Ukraine is ready to react for hostile propaganda. It's 29%. The rest are not ready. For full-scale breakdown in communications and internet, it's 32%. For extreme weather condition, it's 23%, and to widespread of infectious diseases, it's 81%. To Syrian nuclear accident, it's 87%. These are the results I wanted to share with you. Thank you, Mr. Mykhailo. So we can see that, in fact, key parameters in whether there is resilience and how this resilience is formed and which factors influence the resilience. We understand resilience as society, ability of society to renovate the inner balance and to renovate the ability to react to outer challenges and threats, and questions concerning how citizens of a given society associate themselves with other societies and with political organizations and with society itself, how citizens are active in cooperation with other citizens and with authorities and with social institutions, and the level of trust, in fact, between key components of civil society. These are the main key parameters around which sustainability is built up, and these are key parameters which play a crucial role and show how the society is able preserving the inner balance to react to outer threats and challenges, thus preserving its own resiliency, and also it can. But we also understand that in different societies and in different countries, due to different social, cultural factors, parameters of this mutual trust and this societal social activity, they are different, and the nature of these parameters differs a lot, as well as dynamics of the processes influencing these parameters. And here I am glad to give the word to Professor Magnus Carlsson to present results of the survey conducted in Swedish society as for how citizens of Sweden perceive the parameters of sustainability. Thank you.
Magnus, det är din tur att presentera med detta. Det här handlar om motståndsanda, resiliens, hur de här nyckelparametrarna som vi har tittat på kan samvariera med motståndsanda och resiliens, och även hur tillit spelar in i det.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here, and I will, together with Lena Wildereng, present some of the results from our Swedish and Ukrainian study. I'm sorry to say that I don't speak Ukrainian, so that means that I have only a slight awareness of what you have talking about so far, but I recognize the numbers and so on, so I'll try to do my best to connect. And please feel free to interrupt me and ask, and especially Lena, please interrupt me if I'm if I'm saying something wrong, or please add. I represent the Center for Civil Society Research in Stockholm, Sweden, and we have done research on civil society since the early 90s. When the full-scale invasion in Ukraine was a sad fact, we turned our eyes to the civil society in Ukraine to see how that worked and what we could learn from it. And I think so far we have learned a lot, and I'll try to summarize some of it here. And first of all, I'll do my best to get this presentation in order. Do you see a new slide now?
Yes, the slide is shown. It's all good.
Yeah. So the aim of this study is to try to better understand the willingness to defend and the willingness to act in crisis within civil society, and also analyze factors that can shape civic engagement, and to analyze how these rises and develops. And as I'll get back to, it's a big difference when you try to understand the civil society in Sweden and in Ukraine, and I'll get into that. The research questions is about how civic engagement is expressed in different groups in Sweden and Ukraine, and how does it relate to willingness to defend and willingness to act in crisis. And I'll show you a theoretical model that works with resources, commitment, and social networks as ways to strengthen willingness to defend and willingness to act in crisis. And we will also have in this study, but that's not something I will talk to today, hence the italics. We have also focused the local community level in special. I understand that you have already presented the methods for the Ukraine part, but to complement it with the Swedish part is we have asked 5,000 respondents in Sweden in a panel, and that's a national representative sample, and the age is similar but not exactly the same as in the Ukraine study, and the response rate is 51%. And this is some of the result overview in what we can see. And first of all, we asked in Sweden if Sweden should make armed resistance if attacked, and in Ukraine we asked a similar question: do you think it was right to defend yourself when the full-scale invasion was a fact? And as you can see, a large part of the populations in both countries says yes. Yes, absolutely is 70 or 69%, and yes, absolutely or probably is 92, respectively 93%. When we asked if people themselves were prepared to defend their countries in war, armed and with life at risk, 29% answered yes in Ukraine, and 60% answered yes in Sweden. And that is numbers that we can get back to later. But my understanding is that the Swedish numbers might be somewhat overestimated, and the Ukraine numbers might be somewhat underestimated, since some of the people that actually do serve already are not asked. So you have a somewhat higher percentage there, I could imagine. When we asked for civil crisis, when life is not at risk, 65% of the Ukrainians said that they were willing to help, and 94% of the population in Sweden said that they were willing to help. I think that these numbers are both high numbers, and I think I'll come back to why the Swedish numbers is exceptionally high there. There is a big difference in social trust. When we ask people, do you think most people can be trusted? Or do you, so there's only 32% of the Ukrainians says yes, while the Swedish number is 73%. That's a much higher number in Sweden, but actually the Swedish number is exceptional. It's shown study after study that the social trust in Sweden is still very high. We expect that it will lower, but for the moment it's still very, very high considered to all other countries in the world. So it's the Ukrainian number is more to somewhat below average in Europe. When we ask if you trust neighbors, both Ukraine and Sweden says that they trust neighbors to a high degree. When we asked about happiness, that's striking that 62% of the Ukrainians 3 years into the war, the full-scale war, 62% asked that they are very or rather happy still. And we will touch upon that also. Pride in nation, interesting, since both Ukrainians and Swedes are very proud of their nations to a very similar degree. And I'm happy to read that both Ukrainians and Swedes are willing to share in crisis and war, share their resources. So there is a willing to share their personal resources in crisis and war. There is a big difference between Ukraine and Sweden when it comes to memberships in organizations. As you see, for example, 4% of the Ukrainians are members in a sport organization compared to 27% in Sweden. But in the next line, there's a lot of people doing efforts in relation to defense. The Ukrainian defense forces, the 51%, more half the population have done such efforts last year, and that's pretty striking when it comes to these numbers. I told you that there's a much more common that Sweden have formal organizations, and that's kind of part of the interesting thing when you compare the Ukrainian and the Swedish civil society, that we in Sweden have a lot of formal, pretty old civil society organizations, while Ukraine have more of new network-like formations, meaning that in a traditional Western way to understand civil society, some of the civil society actions in Ukraine becomes invisible by this focus on only formal organizations. So that's an important finding for us, I think, that we have also to focus on looser and temporary networks, not only formal organizations. We use a model when we try to understand resilience that states that resilience build on resources, engagement, and networks. And in this, we have specifically focused on preparations, civic engagement, trust, and networks when we try to understand resilience in Sweden and Ukraine. And I stopped there for a few seconds and asked Lena, am I missing something so far?
Not yet. No, this sounds good.
Great.
I'm following, and I also hope that the Ukrainian counterparts are following, and the interpreter is keeping up.
Great. Can I have some kind of a quality check from the Ukrainian participants also? Are you keeping up?
Так, все добре, дуже цікаво. Дякуємо.
Yes, thank you very much. It is very interesting.
Everything is good and it's very interesting. Many thanks.
Great. Then I go on. Thank you. What we have focused on especially is social capital. That is, and what is social capital? And there's a lot of debates going on there in the academic literature. But in roughly you can say that it contains trust, norms, and networks, and that together create social capital. And as we should see, there are two different kinds of social capital in Sweden and Ukraine, but that social capital concept can be a good thing to bear in mind. Some kind of a background here also. I think that we should be aware that both Ukraine and Sweden are very much into democracy. Democracy is an important value, as you can see. Not very much in Sweden. We strongly agree that democracy is important, and to 65%, and another 20% agree. In Ukraine has pretty much the same number as US. I'm not sure what that tells us today, and you can also see that it's compared to Germany. So democracy is an important value both in Sweden and Ukraine, and I think that value, as I told you, when understanding social capital, that part of it was norms, and democracy is an important norm in this case, and that drives what's coming. If you look at trust, I have already told you that social trust differ between Ukraine and Sweden, and that it's more like the Swedish number is very high rather than the Ukraine number is very low, but the difference is high when it comes to social trust, meaning that you trust people in general. But how do you trust people close to you? And as you see in the red numbers here, both Ukraine and Sweden trust family, relatives, neighbors, and people that you know personally to a very high degree. When Sweden, much more than Ukraine, trusts the justice system and the government, but both Ukraine and Sweden, not at least Ukraine, trust the armed forces, and both countries. People in both countries can trust charitable and humanitarian organizations, meaning that what is called institutional trust is, in this case, trust in justice and government system, is high in Sweden, but much more scattered in Ukraine. Scattered because you can also add trust in armed forces into institutional trust. If you put your social capital glasses on, you can see that Sweden, in this case, have what you call a bridging social capital. We have a social form of social capital that is built on that people trust each other in general, while Ukraine has another form of social capital that's called bonding social capital. You trust people close to you, and that both kind of social capital are valuable, but they work in a little different ways, and I'll get back to that. If you look something more into civic engagement in Ukraine and Sweden, as I told you, when it comes to organizations, Swedes are much more organized in formal organizations and in older organizations. Our civil society started in the 1850s, and many of our big organizations today started in the more than 100 years ago. So while when Lena and I do this research, we get the picture that there's a new start of civil society in Ukraine with these revolutions that have been in the last 20 years, Maidan and other ones, which in our understanding has been working as kind of a democracy schools or civil society schools for people. So in my understanding, the Ukrainian loose networks haven't yet established into more formal organizations. That is still something to that might happen. But you can see that as I told you, when it comes to assisting the defense forces of Ukraine or humanitarian charitable organizations, the Ukrainians are very active. Yeah, I already told you about this. Interesting to see is that if you look into Ukraine, those people, and this connects to the Maidan and so on, I think, the people that are protesters are more willing to have more willingness to defend. They are more willing to defend. We asked if people have been active in legal strikes or write petitions and so on, and if they have done that, they have also a higher willingness to defend. And in my understanding, that means that they have a kind of a higher level of active citizenship, that they are engaged in civil society, in society, and this is something that we should explore more, I think. We have already talked about happiness. I won't go into that, but we can see that in Ukraine there are statistical correlations between perceived happiness and war-related efforts, but while in Sweden there are instead such correlation when it comes to efforts in sport, culture, and leisure, social issues, and religious communities. And maybe you should understand this as the connection is between being happy and being involved in something that is important to society for the moment. And you can ask whether it's because you engage because you're happy, or you'll get happy because you engage. It might be both. And this a result that makes me very happy. In Ukraine, 80% believe that makes sense to share with others in crisis situation, and in Sweden the corresponding value is 90%. And I think that both these numbers are high, and also that the numbers in Ukraine have been tested far much more than in Sweden. So that you still have 80% that believe in this is fantastic. Skip this. Yeah. So these networks that I keep telling you about, here you can see that this is from another scientific article, and you can see that helping with material stuff and in informal volunteerism is what's happened there. Not at least helping with material stuff, giving away food stuff and collecting money. That's the kind of things that networks seems to do. So our tentative conclusions is that Ukraine has a relatively strong hand when it comes to bonding social capital and human resources. People are prepared. They have a high degree of political efficacy, and we don't know much yet about the local governance, but that's still to look into. The civil preparedness in Sweden can rely on strong social capital, actually both bridging and bonding social capital. We are both collaborating with people that we don't know, and we are collaborating with people that we do know. We for the moment, Lena and I discuss much that we lack when it comes to local governance and human resources, when it comes to personal preparedness and so on. We can see in our Swedish data that people want to help, but they don't know how to do it. Formal organizations tell us that they need volunteers, but they need volunteers that is actually skilled volunteers, which is harder to find. So that's pretty much it. I thank you very much. Lena, do you have comments so far?
So far, I would like only to mention one thing. As comparing the Swedish and the Ukrainian results, we need to remember that the Ukrainian survey has been carried out in the areas that are not military, as military personnel or as volunteers, where active military, there are active military action. Those people were not surveyed. There may be reasons to believe that the people with the highest, or with a very high will to defend the country, with a very high will to act in crisis, and very high will to help and engage in such activities, that they may be concentrated to the areas that were not surveyed. So this is a limitation in that survey, and it will be very interesting to do some more studies to see how these factors also differ with the people that are at the front or have been to the front. This is all from me. Thank you.
I totally agree with you, Lena, and it can be interesting to hear if our Ukrainian colleagues have something to comment on that. My personal opinion is that it might change the numbers somewhat, but not too much, because there are so many other groups also, old people and young people, and so that you ask. So it have a limited effect on our numbers, but I guess it has some effect. Yes. Thank you very much.
Величезне дякую, Магнус, Лена, за дуже цікаву.
Thank you very much, Magnus and Lena, for a very interesting presentation, for very interesting figures from Sweden, and for the parallels that you managed to draw compared to the Ukrainian results. And we are going to discuss it further. I would like to clarify two important points. Strategically speaking, so to say, where we can see key differences between the civic engagement and resilience in Ukraine and Sweden. In Sweden, according to the results of this survey, civic engagement around formal institutions is high, and the level of trust towards formal and official state institutions is much higher than that in Ukraine, because our resilience, our togetherness of the Ukrainian civil society is based not on formal institutions, but on informal organizations. The togetherness, yes, is based first and foremost on informal networks, horizontal connections, which lays the foundation for our resilience and the civic engagement in Ukraine. It's a pleasure for me to give the floor to Anton Hrushetskyi. Could you please give your comments or your thoughts regarding these surveys? Thank you very much. It was interesting to see the results, to hear the reflections, because I believe that all the sociologists in Ukraine study these issues. You know, the resilience has no resilience index. For example, we cannot say that according to 100 scale, we have 62 or 73. I just want to draw your attention to the fact that there is an issue whether the words of the respondents are then translated into actions, and in Ukraine we can check it, but not all the indicators were high. But anyway, Ukraine managed to survive in 2022. Your latest survey was conducted in 2024, but we now see that since February, since January, after the changes in the USA government, Ukraine also displayed a different level of resilience. In these 6 months, we can see that Ukrainians are together. Of course, we might dislike our government, but we understand that unity is of key importance in our context. We have launched another survey. The results will be published later, and the question was, how long are you going to tolerate the war? And people said that as much as it is necessary. Whether the society is ready to come together, the indicators have not changed, and the majority of the people believe that Ukrainians are coming together even more and more. And we have already seen the horizontal networks, the psychological aspects. I would like to mention that the image of the happy future is being ruined somehow, because when back then we were thinking about the future, which was happy when we are the member of the European Union, but now these indicators are different. So there are fewer people who have optimistic views for the future, and more of those with pessimistic views. When we lose this happy image of the future, and what Magnus has mentioned, that there is no formalization, it is an issue how to turn informal structures into formal ones that will not try and fight back the enemy, but they will provide for the development of our future. And again, in difficult conditions, whether it was in 2014, 2024, 2025, Ukrainians have been demonstrating their willingness to survive no matter what. And of course, we will do our best in order not to just fight back and to survive, but also to develop our country for our future generations. Thank you, Anton. Coming from social dimension towards defense dimension, there are a few important points. The first point is related to the differences that we have seen in the survey results in Sweden and in Ukraine, and correspondingly we can draw a conclusion that the same hybrid weapon of Russia will have a different effect in different societies. For example, in Ukrainian context, it will be different than that of Sweden or other Nordic countries, and there is an open question, in fact. Which model, I mean the model of resilience and civic society, which model is more resilient towards against those external hybrid threats? There are upsides and downsides. We understand that there is this framework and it provides for the stability, but this stability then is translated from top to down. But we understand that if it is undermined, then there will be great instability. And on the other hand, we have a more Ukrainian model, which is not tied to the civil society institutions framework, but there are horizontal initiatives, and it means that we are less dependent on the political institutions, and our resilience will suffer less from the impact at this level. As for the defense, security, and the preservation of resilience, which model is better? For example, when we are talking about hybrid threats, we have to remember that the approach towards resilience has to be hybrid as well. I would like to say a few words. 80% of the people, they trust volunteers, but when we are talking about the trust towards formal organizations, the trust is reduced. Of course, we need to have formal institutions, we need decentralization, which provides for the flexibility. If we, for example, come back to the challenges of 2022, they were different, and these challenges are always evolving. And unfortunately, Ukrainians are not yet able to trust higher level structures, and there is a request to elect a different government after the war. That is why right now it is very difficult to build a formal structure. So Ukraine is a big country. We have frontline areas. That is why, again, there is a problem. Let's hope that we will win the war, we will have lasting peace, and then the decentralized structures will not be so impactful. Then, of course, the situation will change, and the distrust of the majority of the people will remain and will be our issue for the future. I just want to add some differences about two models, formal and informal. In the democratic society, in the civil society, there isn't such a difference, because formal organizations can be only active if they have support from civil society organizations, from the civil society. So there is a big difference from the totalitarian society, when formal organizations are not connected to civil society. I remember the end of 70s, when one of the communist representatives said that no one can overcome us. But all of that was only formal. When the Soviet Union broke up, all of them just got rid of their certificates, and this formal affiliation to this or that party did not influence their consciousness. They were able to have some communist beliefs, but then they would change it very quickly. That is why it is important to connect the formal organizations with informal ones. These organizations have to be active. Thank you, dear colleagues. In fact, apart from the similarities and differences regarding these models, there is also the question to what extent, how effectively we can ensure this resilience and protect it from some influences. And what Anton has mentioned is very correct in the context that the perception of the future by Ukrainians is dependent a lot on external factors, which Russian hybrid weapons are trying to target. We understand that before the election in the USA, before the new administration came to office, we were able to think and to feel more confident when it came to the European Union. But now this political turbulence affects our views. For example, if we were regarding the European institutions as stable ones, that they guarantee, for example, that our membership, for example, will provide added value. But now, judging from the fact how the European Union is trying to respond to the changes in the world in a chaotic manner, we understand that even the European Union, all the European countries do not understand what they are to understand how to ensure internal stability, how to preserve trust. How can we preserve this trust when, for example, we have destructive influence from the Russian hybrid tools, and on the other hand, there are some processes that we cannot objectively impact on, something that goes beyond our control and our abilities. can we say that that this will bring a result, and can we work on some defense mechanisms, the mechanisms to ensure resilience when it is directly impacted by the enemy, but also by the global processes. In case of Europe, about 60% of the people believe that Europe is our ally, but some people believe that they are not very confident. Less than 50% of the people expressed trust towards the European Union. And by the way, in 2022, the majority thought that our future would depend on the NATO, but now we have major reservations. We should also remember about the activities of our public figures. We must be honest and say that our social media are not consolidated. They do not only respond to different events, but they also post this hate speech. And sometimes some centers are more level-headed, but the social media show more fragmentation. Usually, they emphasize different things which can undermine the society. If we cannot influence the global tendencies, if we cannot stop Russia, we can see that over 72% of the people use the consolidated, because if there is an exchange of the information, it would be better, because the more famous the networks are, the better it would be. So the population wants to see the coherent work of different parties, but whether the activists or the civil society is ready for that is an open-ended question. I can just add that if there is a threat to consolidation, the Russian influence is not that impactful, because over the years we have developed strong resilience towards Russian influence. Even those people who read Russian social media are able to distinguish between the manipulation and the truth. So the internal factors have more bearing than the external ones. The Russian information warfare can be impactful if there are some grounds for it within the Ukrainian society. So we cannot say that this threat is provoked just by the Russian warfare. Internal processes are also important compared to that external influence that we have been talking a lot about. I just want to mention that we heard different Russian narratives about occupation, about the war, and in May we posted some key statements of Russian propaganda that, for example, in Ukraine, the Russian-speaking population is oppressed systematically. But as Mykhailo says, the people who read these things, they do not believe it. But of course, Yeah, there are different tensions. Again, all of us are happy that we have 90% of trust towards the armed forces, but if we, for example, ask whether people trust the regular soldiers or officers, we will also see the differences. And for example, even our media, you can see how our media presented the news in which way. And we should understand how the ordinary people, citizens, perceive it. And again, everything depends on the internal processes. Russia understands it as well. That is why they preserve that propaganda and continues with Ukrainian internal processes. Dear colleagues, I agree with you because the strategy of the Russian hybrid warfare and propaganda is very much different from the strategy and propaganda from the World War. If before the propaganda machine was trying to convince someone that the society is not operating correctly, that they have to stop believing something, but right now to achieve such a result is impossible, taking into account a big number of information resources, and if before it could have been controlled, now it is not controlled at all. And of course, the Russian propaganda and their warfare has adapted a lot to the realities, and their warfare is not directed that much at convincing someone, but to sow the seeds of distrust of the citizens towards each other, democratic institutions, government bodies, security bodies, and based on this, they can propel some particular messages, and the main approach of the Russian propaganda lies in the fact that they give some small fragments and they prompt the target audience to make their own conclusions, and which is the biggest threat. For example, we understand that if there are some threats, they come from external world, but when this narrative is made like a puzzle and the target audience is prompted to make their conclusions, it is more dangerous, much more dangerous. And in this case, we can state that this is to be protected. Probably our friends online have some comments or questions. Please, the floor is yours. Yes, a question? I have a question to our Sweden colleagues. My name is Yuri Horbany. A question.
The question is as to scientific interests at sociologists and other scientists, and what is the practical result? How will you spread this result, and how it will influence the social and the thoughts of society in Sweden? Are you going to continue this research further? So, and Sweden became a member of NATO, and Russia increases its military force in the northern direction. Have you got such research? Have you analyzed? Well, we could see that people are ready, Swedes are ready to defend their country. But do people believe that Sweden is ready, that NATO will protect Sweden?
Okay, thank you for the questions. It would be great if any interpreter would repeat the question in English so we can have a full 100% interpretation of that. Is there anyone that can help us with that? Okay, is there any interpreter that can repeat the question in English?
Yes, there is. Yes. Yes. The question is
Magnus, you can choose in the Zoom, in the very program, you can choose
у самій програмі Магнуса ви
the translator.
How can we do that?
I'm not sure how to do that.
We have 3 interpreters that are shown on Zoom, but none of them is making any sound.
Okay, I think I might have found a way. Can the interpreter please say something and we'll try?
Yes, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Let me
Great.
just briefly translate the question of Yuri.
Okay, so can you please repeat the question? Can the interpreter please say the question in English?
Magnus, can you hear me now?
Yes, I hear you.
Yeah. So I'll translate the question to you. Yeah. It consists of 3 parts. So the first one is, would you and your colleagues in Sweden be interested in continuing these researches and in conducting further opinion polls to get additional information, to get the dynamics, and to continue this mutual research with our side? Since we were speaking here about some the foreign factors which influence the resilience and the perception of democratic societies, so the question of Yuri was that does the Sweden society feel itself protected by the NATO? And since Sweden has become the official member of North Atlantic Treaty Organization, does Sweden citizens have the confidence that NATO can defend them? NATO, I mean, as an international security organization, can effectively defend them from different threats and hybrid threats among them at the current moment?
Let me first say that I'm very interested in collaborating further with you when it comes to gathering data about civil society and civil citizenship. The other 2, I think I'm the wrong person to ask about these things. The official statement is that we trust NATO. I mean, we have an agreement in NATO, but I, as a researcher, I have no specific data on that, so I cannot comment it further. I also understand that you have discussed hybrid threats in Ukraine, and as I don't understand Ukraine, I want to add that our study is not about hybrid threats per se. That's something that is still that we still need to explore and to discuss. It's lie in the future to do that. I think it's important not to say more than our data covers, so to say. Thank you.
Дякую, Магнусе. Можливо, є ще питання
Thank you,
онлайн
Magnus.
або офлайн?
Maybe there are more questions online or offline.
Дякую. Тоді будемо
Thank you.
підсумовувати.
Then let's sum up.
Будь ласка, пане Михайло.
Запитання
There is a question, Magnus. As for readiness, preparedness to defend, so I think it will be translated. It will be interpreted.
Тобто англійською, так? About the question, Magnus question about the difference between Sweden and Ukraine about in readiness to defend country. I think that this difference is connected mostly in that in Ukraine, the readiness to defend country is Ukrainians gave answers in real situation, the situation of war. In Sweden, it's the citizens of Sweden gave answers in the hypothetical situation. And when we make study before the war, when also it was a hypothetical situation, also the number of Ukrainians who answered that are ready to defend their country was higher than now, because now that is a very real situation to make to take the arm and go to the battlefield. Also, we can say that persons, people who are on the battlefield, who now in the army, it's more than 1 million of persons, were unreachable for us because it's face-to-face interview. Maybe if we make telephone interview, such persons would be more reachable for us. But even in the rear region, there are many people in the army, but they are in the special territory and are unreachable for the respondents. So this 4% of people who respondents who answer that they participated in the war, it's mostly the former participants. And in reality, we have much more people who participate in the war than this 4% among percent in our sample.
Yeah, thank you. I totally agree with you. I think that Ukraine is saying something about the real situation, and the Swedes are doing comment on a hypothetical situation. I totally agree about that, and my expectations would be that if Sweden was 3 years into a war, or even more, depending on how we would also have a lower percent as we learned how terrible war is. But that said, I think that the situation that fighting Ukrainians are underrepresented in the material is you should know better than me, but I expect that the percentage of this should be a popular national representative study, and even if you included this, they should be people at the front. They would be a very small percentage of all people that are counted, so to say. So I don't think that the numbers would be affected very much by that. However, I think that the numbers in Sweden would be affected if we were into war. I totally agree with that. But I think you should consider another thing also, and that's this about trust and citizenship and these kind of variables that I think affect willingness to defend to some degree. If you have a high level of trust and a high level of bridging social capital, I would expect the Swedish number to be somewhat higher because of that. But that's hypothetical and thinking. So we don't know. That's as you understand, I hope we never find out.
May I add to that, Magnus?
Sure.
As the full-scale occupation war in Ukraine started in 2022, we actually got a bit of a answer to whether the Swedish people were ready to prepared to defend. In that case, that was not their own country, but we saw a lot of Swedish people traveling to Ukraine in the form of volunteers, medics, and combatants. And that shows that when the situation is not hypothetical anymore, and the people get the opportunity to defend democracy, freedom, human rights, then Swedish people, not all of them, of course, but there are examples of Swedish people actually taking that chance and taking the draft or leaving to Ukraine or to wherever the fight is being fought. So we have a few insights of what happens when those people who believe highly in democracy and the democracy is being under attack, what they will do and what lengths that they are ready to go to. Thank you.
Well, I think that, Linda, that is an important thing to highlight, but still we should be aware that the number of people doing this is very small compared to the whole population, and the reasons why they did it, we have only stories here and there, so to say. That's anecdotal. So it's still to be researched, but it's an important thing to highlight because it's well worth investigating more.
Thank you. And also, I would like to say about the difference between Ukraine and Russia in such situation. In Ukraine, young people much more than old people answer that they would like to participate in the defense of Ukraine, to serve in the army. In Russia, the difference with Russia is that in Russia, the older are people, more often they answer they would participate in the war. And the highest percent of respondents who answered that they would want to to serve in the army among the people older than 60 years. The people even theoretically can serve in the army, but they more often answer that would like to participate in the war, and the lowest share of people who would like to serve in the army and participate in the war is among the youngest.
I had a little problem with the sound here, but as I understand it, excuse me. I have some problem with the sound here, but as I understand it, you told that in Ukraine there are young people that want to defend the country, and in Russia it is older people that wants to participate in the war, and I have no data on that, but in what we see in other data, it makes sense because this of the believing in democracy and believing in defending your country and defending democracy rather than attacking and trying to preserve things. In my understanding, it's young people are defending their future, their democratic future, and I would not be surprised if that's the reason. That's the main reason. But again, I guess you know better than me because you have studied this. Thank you.
Дякую. Дякую, друзі, шановні колеги.
Thank you, friends. Thank you, honored colleagues. I think it was a great discussion. Thank you for our dialogue. And our today's event confirmed that this is an important topic which has to be developed, which has to be analyzed further, and we have to learn about actual tendencies which are actual for our society, and also make comparative research and with our allies and with our friends in Western countries, because we live in common geopolitical conditions and in conditions of common threats, and to be more effective to use common effort to counterfight threats and to preserve our resilience, we have to join our efforts and resource to be able to make it effectively. We have to learn each other, to know each other, and to know everyone. So I would like to greet everyone for participation in this event, and I think it's one of the possible common events embracing our common research, because the topic is very actual and it needs our expertise and discussions. Thank you, Ukrinform, for giving opportunity, and thank you our defenders, armed forces of Ukraine, without whom this meeting wouldn't be possible. Thank you. Peaceful day. See you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.